Peter had always prided himself on being a good husband. At 48, he had built a comfortable life with Tina, his wife of 8 years. They lived in a spacious, well-decorated house nestled in Vancouver, a city that mirrored the beauty Tina often captured with her camera. Peter, a software engineer, was a man of logic, precision, and routines. He thrived in his work at a leading tech company, specializing in data management software for businesses. Every day was structured, predictable, until the cracks in his marriage started to show. Peter's daily routine was simple. Wake up early, go for a run along the tree-lined streets of their neighborhood, and then immerse himself in the endless flow of emails and programming codes at work. Evenings were spent quietly with Tina, though the vibrancy they once had as a couple had begun to fade. Tina's career as a professional photographer meant she traveled frequently for work. At first, Peter admired her passion, her relentless pursuit of capturing the world's natural beauty. But lately, something had shifted. Each time she returned home from a business trip, she seemed more distant, more distracted. The routine dinners they once enjoyed together became strained, filled with long silences where laughter used to be. Tina's stories about her adventures and photo shoots were now reduced to brief, emotionless summaries. Peter would ask about her trips, hoping to spark some kind of connection, but her responses were always short, detached. "It's just work, Peter," Tina would say, avoiding eye contact. "I'm exhausted from traveling." Peter, always the rational man, accepted her excuses for a while. But the growing distance between them gnawed at him. Deep down, he felt something wasn't right, but he didn't have the energy to confront it. His focus remained on his job, his colleagues, and his relentless drive for success. He worked late into the night, perhaps as a way to avoid the uncomfortable reality that his marriage was crumbling. Tina, now 45, was once deeply in love with Peter. His stability, calm demeanor, and steady career had initially attracted her. But over the years, the excitement had faded. As a photographer, her life was filled with adventure, travel, and a hunger for creativity. Tina lived for the moments when she could stand on the edge of a cliff, camera in hand, waiting for the perfect light to illuminate a stunning landscape. It was her passion, her escape from the mundane. But with each trip, she found herself feeling lonelier. Peter didn't understand her world anymore. He was content with his predictable, structured life, while she craved spontaneity and connection. That was when Noah came into the picture. Noah was everything Peter wasn't. A fellow photographer in his mid-30s, Noah was adventurous, impulsive, and endlessly charming. He had a rugged, untamed look about him, dark hair tousled from the wind, a perpetual 5 o'clock shadow, and eyes that sparkled with mischief. They had met during a photo shoot in the Rockies, both working on a project for a well-known travel magazine. At first, their relationship was purely professional. They bonded over their shared love of photography and the thrill of capturing the perfect shot. But as the months went by, their connection deepened. During long nights by the campfire, they'd talk for hours about art, nature, their dreams, and the loneliness that sometimes crept into their lives. Tina found herself confiding in Noah, sharing thoughts she hadn't even told Peter. She felt understood in a way she hadn't in years. The attraction was undeniable, and soon they crossed the line. One night, after a long day of shooting, they ended up in Noah's tent, where passion overtook reason. Tina knew it was wrong, but she couldn't stop herself. With Noah, she felt alive again, desired, and wanted. It was a feeling she hadn't experienced with Peter in a long time. The guilt gnawed at her, but the thrill of the affair was intoxicating. Every time she returned home to Peter, she felt a pang of regret. But the distance between them had grown too vast, and the lies came easier with each trip. Peter wasn't oblivious to the changes in his wife. He noticed how she no longer smiled as brightly when she came home, how she avoided physical contact with him, always claiming she was too tired or stressed. The intimacy they once shared had all but disappeared, replaced by awkward silences and half-hearted attempts at conversation. It was late one night when Peter's suspicions reached a boiling point. Tina had just returned from another trip, and as they lay in bed, he reached out to hold her. She pulled away, turning her back to him. That was the moment Peter knew something was terribly wrong. He couldn't shake the feeling that Tina was hiding something. His mind raced with possibilities. Was she unhappy? Was she seeing someone else? The thought of his wife with another man made his stomach churn. He tried to dismiss it, telling himself he was overreacting, but the nagging doubt wouldn't go away. After a few more sleepless nights, Peter made a decision. He would find out the truth. He couldn't live in uncertainty any longer. If Tina was cheating, he needed to know. And so, with a heavy heart, he reached out to a private investigator. Peter chose a discreet, professional detective agency that specialized in cases of infidelity. He provided them with Tina's travel itinerary and instructed them to follow her every move on her next business trip. It felt wrong to spy on his wife, but Peter couldn't shake the feeling that this was the only way to uncover the truth. A week later, Tina packed her bags for another trip. She kissed Peter goodbye, her smile more distant than ever. Peter tried to act normal, but inside, his heart was pounding. He knew that within days, he would have the answers he so desperately sought. The detective followed Tina from the moment she left their home. He reported back to Peter daily, detailing her movements. At first, everything seemed innocent. Tina attended meetings with colleagues, visited photo locations, and did everything she had always said she was doing. But then Noah appeared. The detective quickly noticed the closeness between Tina and Noah. They weren't just colleagues. Their interactions were far too intimate. The way they looked at each other, the subtle touches, the private conversations, they all pointed to one conclusion. On the second night of the trip, the detective followed them to a hotel. Tina and Noah checked in together, sharing a room. That night, the detective captured the evidence Peter had feared. Photos of Tina and Noah entering the hotel, hand in hand. Images of them in a secluded area, kissing passionately, their bodies entwined in a way that left no doubt. Peter received the detective's report the following morning. When he opened the email, his heart sank. The photos were undeniable. His wife was having an affair. The betrayal hit him like a punch to the gut, leaving him breathless and shattered. Tina had been lying to him for months, living a double life, and now he had the proof. Peter sat in his office, staring at the screen. The images of Tina and Noah felt like a physical weight pressing down on him. He clicked through them over and over again, hoping to find some explanation, some detail that would make this easier to bear. But there was no mistake. Tina had betrayed him in the most intimate way possible. His emotions swirled: anger, heartbreak, confusion. How could the woman he had loved and trusted for 8 years do this to him? How had he not seen it coming? Peter clenched his fists, fighting the urge to smash his computer in a fit of rage. But that wouldn't fix anything. Nothing could undo what had already been done. Peter thought about all the nights Tina had come home late, claiming she was exhausted from work. All the time she'd pulled away from him in bed. The signs had been there, but he had ignored them, too wrapped up in his own routine to notice that his marriage was falling apart. He had always assumed that Tina's distance was due to the pressures of her job, the long hours she spent on the road, capturing perfect landscapes. He had never imagined that she was seeking intimacy elsewhere. The hurt festered like an open wound. Peter knew he had to confront Tina, but the thought of doing so filled him with dread. Would she lie? Would she try to make excuses? The images of her with Noah were burned into his mind, and Peter realized he could never look at her the same way again. Tina sat in her hotel room, staring at the ceiling. She had just spent another night with Noah, wrapped in his arms, but the warmth she felt with him was tainted by guilt. The rush of passion that had once excited her was now overshadowed by the weight of what she had done. Every time she left Noah's side, she was reminded of Peter, the man who had loved her, trusted her, and been by her side for nearly a decade. She loved Peter. At least she thought she did. But the connection they once shared had faded, buried beneath the monotony of daily life. With Noah, everything felt alive again, the excitement, the passion, the thrill of being desired. But now, Tina wasn't sure if it had all been worth it. Every time she returned home, the guilt gnawed at her. She felt like a stranger in her own life. Tina had never intended for things to go this far. The first time she and Noah had crossed the line, It had been spontaneous, a moment of weakness that had spiraled out of control. She had told herself it would just be a fling, something to fill the emotional void in her marriage. But the more time she spent with Noah, the harder it became to stop. She had tried to break things off once, but the pull was too strong. With Noah, she felt like the woman she used to be, young, carefree, and full of life. But the consequences of her actions were catching up to her. Every time she looked at Peter, she saw the man who had supported her dreams, who had been patient with her career and understood her need for space. She didn't deserve his kindness, and the shame weighed heavily on her. Could Peter ever forgive her if he knew? Could she even forgive herself? When Tina returned home from her latest trip, she could tell something was different. Peter wasn't his usual quiet self. He didn't greet her at the door with his typical smile or ask how her trip had been. Instead, he sat in the living room, his back straight, his expression unreadable. "Peter," Tina said cautiously, dropping her bag by the door. "I'm home." Peter's eyes met hers, and the coldness in his gaze made her heart skip a beat. This wasn't the man she knew. Something had shifted. "Sit down," Peter said, his voice calm but deadly serious. Tina hesitated, fear creeping into her chest. She sat across from him, her hands trembling slightly. "We need to talk," Peter continued. His tone was so flat, so detached, that it made Tina's stomach churn. Tina swallowed hard, her mind racing. Did he know? Had he found out about Noah? The guilt that had been gnawing at her suddenly surged to the surface, and she felt like she was about to be sick. "Peter, what's going on?" she asked, her voice trembling. She tried to keep her composure, but her heart was pounding in her chest. Peter didn't answer immediately. He leaned forward, his elbows resting on his knees, and locked eyes with her. "Why did you betray me?" The question hit Tina like a sledgehammer. Her breath caught in her throat, and she felt the room spin. This was it. He knew. "Peter, she stammered, tears welling up in her eyes. She could see the pain in his expression, the anger simmering just beneath the surface. There was no point in lying anymore. She had been caught. "I know everything, Tina," Peter said, his voice low and filled with hurt. "I hired a private investigator. He followed you on your last trip. I saw the photos. You and Noah. You've been cheating on me for months." Tina felt her world collapse around her. She had prepared for this moment in her mind, but nothing could have prepared her for the devastation she saw in Peter's eyes. The guilt that had been eating away at her now consumed her entirely. "I'm sorry, Peter," she whispered, tears streaming down her face. "I didn't mean for this to happen. I didn't know how far it would go." Peter stood up abruptly, unable to sit any longer. His hands were shaking as he paced the room. "You didn't mean for it to happen?" he repeated, his voice rising. "You didn't mean to sleep with another man? You didn't mean to lie to me, to betray me every time you came home? Don't insult me, Tina. You knew exactly what you were doing." Tina sobbed, burying her face in her hands. "I'm so sorry, Peter. I made a mistake. I was lonely. I felt disconnected from you. But it doesn't mean I don't love you." Peter let out a bitter laugh. "Love? You call this love? What you did? That's not love, Tina. You destroyed everything we had. How could you do this to me?" Tina looked up at him, her eyes pleading. "Please, Peter, we can fix this. I'll end it with Noah. I'll do anything. I don't want to lose you." Peter shook his head, his expression hardening. "It's too late. You've already lost me. I can't forgive you for this." The finality in his words hit Tina like a blow to the chest. She had hoped, despite everything, that Peter would give her a second chance. But as she looked into his eyes, she saw the truth. There was no going back. She had crossed the line, and their marriage was over. Tina packed her bags in a daze, the reality of her situation sinking in. Peter hadn't spoken another word to her after their confrontation. He had simply told her to leave. As she stuffed her clothes into a suitcase, her mind replayed the last few months, the choices she had made, the lies she had told. She had no one to blame but herself. Noah called her later that night, but Tina didn't pick up. What was the point? Their affair had ruined everything. She had risked her marriage for a fleeting passion, and now she had nothing. The thrill of being with Noah seemed so small, so insignificant compared to the life she had destroyed. As she left the house she had shared with Peter, Tina felt an overwhelming sense of loss. The man she had once loved, the life they had built together, it was all gone. And now she was alone. After Tina walked out of the house, Peter felt a strange sense of calm wash over him. The storm of emotions that had been raging inside him for days, anger, hurt, betrayal, had quieted. He was numb now, drained from the confrontation. Yet beneath that numbness, there was still a sharp pain lodged deep in his chest. The images of Tina and Noah replayed in his mind like a broken record, each repetition twisting the knife deeper. But Peter knew he couldn't stay in this state forever. He had to move on. For 8 years, Tina had been the center of his life. Now, she was gone, and he had to figure out what to do next. There was a part of him that wanted revenge, not just against Tina, but against Noah too. The thought of confronting Noah, of making him pay for what he had done, filled Peter with a dark sense of satisfaction. But he knew that wouldn't solve anything. Instead, Peter decided to focus on rebuilding his life. He threw himself into his work, taking on more projects and working longer hours. At first, it was just a way to distract himself from the pain, but soon he found that the more he immersed himself in his career, the more control he felt over his life. Work became his escape, a way to channel his emotions into something productive. Yet even as Peter busied himself with work, the thought of Tina lingered in the back of his mind. He wondered what she was doing, whether she regretted her choices. He imagined her with Noah, continuing their affair without a care in the world, and the thought made his blood boil. That's when Peter made a decision, a quiet, calculated move to ensure that Tina would never forget the consequences of her betrayal. He started the divorce proceedings quickly, making sure everything was clean, efficient, and legally airtight. Tina would get no sympathy from him. He had worked hard for everything they had, his savings, their house, and he wasn't about to let her walk away with a piece of it. His lawyer was ruthless, ensuring that Tina would leave with little more than her personal belongings. But that wasn't the real revenge. The real revenge came in the form of complete and utter silence. Peter cut all ties with Tina, blocked her from every aspect of his life, his phone, his email, and even social media. She had chosen her path, and now she had to live with the consequences of being erased from Peter's world. He refused to give her the satisfaction of knowing how deeply she had hurt him. For Peter, the most satisfying revenge was the knowledge that Tina would spend the rest of her life wondering what she had lost. Tina had no idea how quickly her life would fall apart after the confrontation. When Peter told her to leave, she thought he would come around eventually. She had expected anger, but not finality. As she drove away from the house, her mind raced with ideas on how she could fix things. She considered calling Peter, sending him a heartfelt letter, even showing up at his office to beg for another chance. But each attempt at reaching out was met with cold silence. Peter had shut her out completely. Without Peter, Tina's life felt empty. The relationship with Noah, once thrilling and exciting, had lost its luster. Their secret meetings no longer felt like forbidden passion. Instead, they were tinged with guilt and shame. When Noah texted her after she moved out of Peter's house, she hesitated before replying. What was she doing? Was this really worth losing her marriage over? They met a few more times, but the connection between them had changed. Tina was distracted, withdrawn, and filled with regret. Noah, sensing the shift, began to distance himself as well. He had never wanted something serious. He enjoyed the fling, the passion of their stolen moments, but he wasn't interested in the complications of a full-blown relationship. One evening, after a particularly awkward encounter, Noah looked at her with a mixture of pity and frustration. Tina, this isn't working anymore. You need to figure out what you want. Tina knew he was right, but what she wanted was already gone. Peter was gone. Alone in her small apartment, Tina found herself slipping into a dark place. She had always been independent, a free spirit who thrived on her passion for photography and travel. But without Peter, the stability she had once taken for granted, her life felt unanchored. The project she once loved now felt hollow. She couldn't focus on her photography anymore, her camera sitting unused in the corner of her apartment. The joy she used to feel while capturing nature's beauty had vanished. replaced by a gnawing sense of loss. Tina tried to distract herself by going out, meeting friends, but nothing filled the void. The guilt weighed heavily on her, and she replayed the moments with Peter in her mind. His calm demeanor as he confronted her, the coldness in his voice when he told her to leave. She had destroyed everything, and there was no going back. Months passed, and Peter found himself slowly moving on from the pain of Tina's betrayal. The initial shock had faded, replaced by a quiet determination to rebuild his life. He had thrown himself into his work at first, but over time, he began to realize that there was more to life than his career. The pain had taught him a valuable lesson. He needed to take care of himself, to find fulfillment outside of his work and the relationship that had defined him for so long. Peter started spending more time with friends, reconnecting with people he had drifted away from during his marriage. He took up new hobbies, activities he had always wanted to try, but never found the time for. Photography, ironically, was one of them. It was something that had always fascinated him, but he had left it to Tina. Now, he found solace in capturing the world through his own lens, exploring the beauty of Vancouver's landscapes in a way he never had before. Eventually, Peter met someone new. It wasn't a whirlwind romance like what he had experienced with Tina all those years ago, but something more steady, more grounded. Her name was Emily, a warm, kind-hearted woman who worked in the marketing department of a company Peter had partnered with. They met over coffee to discuss a project, and before Peter realized it, they were talking for hours. Emily had a quiet strength that Peter admired, and over time, their connection deepened. Peter wasn't rushing into anything. He had learned the hard way that relationships were fragile, and he wasn't ready to dive headfirst into another one. But with Emily, there was no rush. It felt natural. And for the first time in months, Peter found himself smiling again. One cold, rainy evening, Tina found herself walking aimlessly through the streets of Vancouver. She had been trying to distract herself with a new photography project, but the passion wasn't there anymore. Every click of the shutter felt like a reminder of the life she had destroyed. She stopped by the waterfront, staring out at the gray expanse of the sea. The wind whipped her hair, and the cold rain soaked through her jacket, but she barely noticed. Her thoughts were on Peter, as they had been for months. She had tried to move on with Noah, but their relationship had fizzled out quickly. Noah had stopped contacting her weeks ago, and Tina had made no effort to reach out. What was the point? She had lost everything that mattered. Tina thought about the night she had crossed the line with Noah, how it had felt so thrilling at the time, but now seemed like the biggest mistake of her life. She had thrown away her marriage, her stability, for a fleeting moment of passion. Now, standing alone in the rain, she realized the full extent of what she had lost. Peter had been more than just her husband. He had been her anchor, the person who had supported her through everything. But it was too late to fix things. Peter had made it clear that he wanted nothing to do with her. He had moved on, while Tina was left to pick up the pieces of her shattered life. Tina stood outside Peter's house one last time. It had been months since she had left, and the divorce was finalized. She hadn't seen Peter since that day, and the thought of facing him now filled her with a mix of dread and sadness. But she needed closure. She needed to say goodbye. As she rang the doorbell, her heart pounded in her chest. She had no idea what she would say to him, or if he would even open the door. But after a few moments, the door creaked open, and there he was, Peter, looking older, more tired, but still the man she had once loved. "Tina," he said, his voice neutral. He didn't step aside to invite her in, but he didn't close the door either. I just wanted to say goodbye," Tina stammered, her voice barely audible. "I know I hurt you, and I'm sorry. I'm so sorry." Peter's expression softened slightly, but his eyes remained guarded. "There's nothing more to say, Tina. It's over. I know," she whispered, tears welling in her eyes. I needed to see you one last time." Peter nodded, the sadness in his eyes mirroring her own. "Take care, Tina." With that, the door closed, and Tina was left standing in the cold, the finality of their broken marriage sinking in. Peter watched through the window as Tina walked away, disappearing into the night. A part of him still felt the sting of her betrayal, but another part of him had healed. He had found peace in the months since their separation, And while the pain of what she had done would never fully disappear, he knew it was time to move on. As he turned away from the window, Peter felt a sense of closure wash over him. His life had changed irrevocably, but he was ready to embrace the future, one step at a time. And so, Peter moved forward, leaving the past behind.